personal, only a dream, breaks and schemes. Waking up at dawn, all my fears are gone. All stop today, never, never, not today. Step by step I go, faster than the flow. Broke through every chain, I will not be contained.
Yeah, Boomer's mooted. Love it. I love it. Ah, well, damn. I said something that was really smart. It happens all the time. And then, you know, after I mute, I realize it wasn't smart at all. Or maybe it was. You'll never know. More than likely it was. The once in my life I say something intelligent. Good evening, Stacy. Good to see you. Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights. Evening to you also. And T-Rex, Deborah Kennedy. Boomer's muted. Yes, T-Rex. I am storm safe for now, but if I have to shut down the stream, it's just because I lost power. Hopefully everything is sounding a little bit better now that I've got a little bit of soundproofing here. It should cut down on some of the reverb. Not all of it, but it should cut down on some of it. I was getting a little bit of weird echo, like a small room echo. Hope that took care of it. Don't know, but we will see. Well, tonight, going through Shauna Gardner's bond hearing for this alleged murder for hire. And this is the lead detective that's on the witness stand. It is the defense's turn to ask them questions. So here we go. Let's do this. Hey, good to see you, Fly on the Wall. Hope you're doing well.
Sorry, Mr. Price.
Pressure to do the job right.
Of course.
Okay. And of course, that's what you wanted to do, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so, sir, I want to kind of go back and let's start with your testimony about the divorce between Jared Bridegan and Shauna Gardner.
Sure.
Now,
Hey, Debbie, good to see
you
you.
know, of course, what you testified that it was a acrimonious divorce, correct?
Correct.
And that a majority of the issues that they had between the two of them were child custody issues, correct?
That's correct.
Hey, Eugene, how you doing? Good to see you.
As part of your job and part of the investigation, it would have been for you to not just take people's words for it, but to actually check the docket of the cases that were involved between Jared Bridegan and Shauna Gardner, correct?
I would say that's true, but in this case, that's language coming directly from the defendant.
Okay. But of course, you would verify that, right?
In this case, I didn't feel that I needed to verify words that I'm using that she stated.
Oh, I am.
But yes, they were verified.
Okay. And who verified them? You?
I did not know.
Okay. But as this being your case, of course, the information came to you.
Yes.
And you relied on your testimony based on all the information that you gathered, correct?
Correct.
Some of which you did, some of which you did not do, correct?
That's fair, yes.
Okay, so, sir, are you aware, in fact, that a majority of the issues, well, if not all of the issues, revolve around money and not child custody, as you testified?
I have not read all of the arguments or motions that were filed in their case. I'm solely going off of what I learned during interviews.
So tell me if you take issue with what I'm about to tell you. You're aware that Shanna filed for divorce in February of 2015, correct?
Correct, yes.
And in fact, it was resolved on July of 15, that same year, correct?
That's correct.
So it's quite a quickie divorce, wouldn't you say?
I'm not sure. I don't
You've never
have a lot of experience in how long divorce proceedings typically take.
You've never had the pleasure of being divorced.
I didn't say that. I just said I'm not a family law person. I don't know how long it takes.
Okay, but you would agree, you wouldn't characterize 5 months as a long drawn out divorce.
It would appear. I would assume that it's fairly typical.
Okay. And as included in that agreement was, of course, the parenting agreement, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
As well as custody, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. And the first issue that occurred was in January of 16 when Shanna Gardner asked for child support against Jared Bridegan, correct?
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Okay, well, you're also aware that Jared Bridegan moved to Utah.
Holy cow, T's T. Thank you for the 10 gifted memberships. Oh my gosh, let's give you a little bit of love there. We'll just show you a little bit there.
Touchdown. Paper unbreaded.
Oh yes, that is pretty damned awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That right there, we got to get it up here because I have no idea who was gifted those memberships. I always slack on this. I don't know why it is. I brain fart and don't pay any attention to it. Looks like Deborah Kennedy got a gifted membership. Shannon Davis, Graceful Klutz. I like that name. Graceful Klutz got one. Forever Not Me. Jerry Bate, Jen Woodall, Sunshine Nana, and David Air Force Vet. I used to be younger. He's Donna Shepard. Thank you so much for the gifted memberships. Hey Elka, how you doing? It is wonderful. That is so kind for you to do that, TST. That really makes me. Thank you so much. It's pretty cool. Sorry if I'm a little hoarse. No, I mean a little hoarse. Like I walk around on all not that either. Sorry.
In November of 2015, correct?
That's correct.
And he got a job over there.
I believe we watched this all last time, and let me double check.
Was it his first homicide investigation too?
Oh yeah, okay. We did watch this part of it last time, so we went through all of this with him, and then they took a break, if I'm not mistaken.
The state attorney's office. Wouldn't you agree?
It was made there, yes.
Yeah, they took a break after. So that was the end of this police officer's testimony, and I believe
Cold.
bringing in someone new.
Cold. You're a big boy. You wake up more. I got two. I'm going for it.
Yeah, let me get past some of this stuff here. All right, so they're bringing her in for the bond hearing. Double checking.
Photos of her children.
Yeah, this is it. This is where we left off. This is where, because this is what happens whenever you end up writing a response letter to some Looney Tune. You end up forgetting where exactly you were at in the matter of these things. So let's go ahead and get this thing kicked back in. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow night I'll be I'm going to go over some of the deposition, probably for about an hour. I should be able to get through one of them tomorrow night. If not, then you'll just see me. Jeez, man.
All right, session.
It's loud.
Have you seated?
Hey, David. David Air Force Back. Good to see you, David.
Thank you. What's, Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense will call Henry Cox.
Henry's cock. What? Come on, Henry. You can move faster than that.
Please, you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Watch step.
Excellent. Excellent.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Cox, you're an attorney here in Jacksonville, Florida, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
How
Mr.
long have you been
Pack.
a member of the Florida Bar?
This is the 50th year.
And your law firm, sir, was retained in April of 2022 by Shannon Gardner, is that correct?
Correct.
And that initially followed the publishing of photos of her children by the media.
You did?
Now, I want to fast forward to the fall of 2022. Were you aware that Miss Gardner moved to Washington State?
Yes.
Was that done in secrecy, sir?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, she notified the Duval County school system where her children would be enrolled in Washington.
And in fact, law enforcement executed a search warrant on her home in February of 2023 in West Richland, Washington, correct?
That's correct.
And did the state attorney's office know that you were representing Miss Gardner by the end of 2022?
Yes, they did.
Had you had multiple conversations with them at many levels?
I don't know that I had multiple conversations with them. They knew it.
Did they ever reach out to you and ask you where Miss Gardner was?
No,
Would you have told them?
I would have.
And did you know where she was?
I knew exactly where she was.
Now, after that warrant was executed on Miss Gardner's home on February 6th of 2023, at that time, did you start to believe that Miss Gardner may be a suspect in the murder of Jared Bridegan?
I think a reading the search warrants would have made it obvious.
Now, later in February 17th of 2023, there was a hearing about the cell phones that were seized in February from Miss Gardner's home, correct?
Those were in front of Judge Carbula.
And so you had more communication with the state about this case in February of 2023.
Yes, I represented Ms. Gardner in front of Judge Carbula.
Now,
Oh,
you became aware that Mr. Fernandez was arrested on March 16th of 2023 in Orlando, correct?
Correct.
When I approach the witness,
Yes.
I'm now handing the witness what's defendants for. Mr. Cox, can you please explain defendants for in the context of it to Judge Kite?
I had learned from Mr. Jesse Dreiser that his client had been arrested close to Orlando. He let me know that. And so I am almost immediately sent an email to Ms. Stifler in the state attorney's office, letting her know that telling her that if she was interested in Ms. Gardner surrendering, she would do so immediately.
Did you ever receive a response to that email?
I did not.
oh,
Now,
that's not good.
after Mr. Fernandez was arrested, did Miss Gardner return to Florida,
No, she did not.
to Tallahassee?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, she did go to Tallahassee.
Okay, so she was in the state of Florida.
She was.
And why did she come back to the state of Florida?
I was dealing with a lawyer in Salt Lake City named Tim Anderson, who represented Ms. Gardner's family there for many, many years. I told Mr. Anderson that I had already committed to the state of Florida, that I would surrender Ms. Gardner immediately upon their request, and that was meaningless if she were in the state of Washington. And I recommended she come to Florida and be somewhere in Florida so I could produce on the commitment I made. I talked to an attorney in Tallahassee named Richard Doran, that's Doran, and I said, look, if I have a client come to Tallahassee and live there temporarily, would you be available in case some problems arose, meaning if police came to arrest her or whatever? And he agreed to do that. I talked to an attorney in West Palm Beach named Scott Richardson, I knew Mr. Richardson had previously had experience with Airbnbs in Tallahassee when he was chair of the Board of Bar Examiners. I asked him if he had a recommendation. He did. I made arrangements with Tim Anderson that Ms. Gardner would come to Tallahassee and stay there, and we would wait to hear from the state of Florida.
You never hear from the state of
Oh,
Florida.
Never.
that's not
And
good.
at some point, she also went to
That's-
Savannah, Georgia.
I
which
mean,
was
that's a
also
good
striking
thing on
distance
her.
of Jacksonville.
She went to Savannah, Georgia because her parents determined to visit her when they could. Travel between Salt Lake City and Tallahassee was very, very difficult. Savannah was much easier than Tallahassee. So I called a lawyer named, I'm trying to remember her name, Amy Copeland, who was recommended to me by John Ossick in Georgia. She's in Savannah. I said the same thing to her that I said to Richard Doran. If problems come up and if I make arrangements for a client to stay in Savannah, would you be available to help if I need help? She recommended an Airbnb in Savannah, and that's where Miss Gardner went to from Tallahassee. The advantage of Savannah was twofold. Number one, it was easier for her parents to get to. And number two, it was about the same distance from Jacksonville to Savannah as far as me being able to produce Miss
Yeah,
Gardner
that's pretty close.
whenever they said we want to arrest her. So that's where it was. I also add there was another reason for going to Tallahassee and Savannah, and that was Mr. Anderson, the family, I, and everyone in my firm knew that if it was an arrest in Seattle, I mean, not Seattle, Western Washington, it's not Eastern, it's Western Washington, that it would be done by several officers in the presence of her children, and we were doing everything we could to try to avoid that. So that's why we went to Tallahassee and then Savannah.
And Miss Gardner stayed for at least several months in the general area of striking distance to Jacksonville, awaiting essentially for the state to reach out to you, correct?
She did.
But that never happened, and she eventually returned to Washington State.
No, and that was because after so much time, it was just, well, they know where she is because they was there when they served the search warrants. So they know where she lives in Washington. And now so much time had passed, she wanted to be with her children. It was understandable. They were having with their anxieties from being away from their mother. So we said, well, let's just gamble and let her go back and see what happens.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Cross.
Mr. Cox, why not Jacksonville?
Primarily because of the media attention, and anywhere she went, someone would say that's Shanna Gardner.
Yeah, it's
The
true.
only reason why she didn't pick Jacksonville.
No, there's no fear of her being arrested. We're willing to surrender. Why else? Why would we be here to be on TV all the time? As a matter of fact, local television went to Western Washington to her home.
You would agree that it is common for defense lawyers to let the state of Florida know that they can turn in their clients.
Depending on the circumstances, certainly, yeah. It's not uncommon.
Obviously, if you've already been retained.
I was representing her, yes.
So you would agree that typically, the more violent the charge, the less likely the state takes you up on it.
Not necessarily. I think it's a matter of evaluating all the circumstances.
Well, you would agree if it were a warrant for, a DUI or domestic violence or something like that, the state of Florida would be more likely to take you up on a voluntary surrender as opposed to a murder or a murder.
Well, Mr. Mizrahi, I've had that experience cut both ways on all kinds of charges. So to say it's the most serious charge, therefore I'm not going to get notice ahead of time. I would have been perfectly willing to say she is at such and such an address in Tallahassee, Florida, waiting for you. Such and such address in Savannah, Georgia, waiting for you.
No, again, I'm not saying that there aren't situations where first-degree murderers turn themselves in voluntarily or DUIs.
You're not going to beat this guy.
Generally speaking,
They're trying to play some sort of got you. This is no big got you. This is like a nothing burger. What he's telling this guy is she was ready and willing to turn herself in. All you had to do was reach out to me and tell me that you want her to turn herself in. If you want to go and arrest her, I can tell you exactly where she's at any given point, know exactly where she's at, but that's not what they did. They waited so damn long to arrest her. They waited until she went back to Washington and then they arrested her because they didn't want to listen. They wanted to make a big show out of it. Also, it makes her look much more guilty if they're having to show up at her house and arrest her. Then you've got the court of public opinion that makes them think, well, she must be guilty because they had to come and arrest her. They had all the cops right there. They had all the cameras. So tell me, how is this any different than somebody that's on the lam? They're running from the cops. They're trying to avoid getting arrested. That's not what she was trying to do, but that's what they were trying to make it look like. Whenever she moved to Washington, moved her kids along with her, registered them in the school. They knew where she was at. They knew how to get in touch with her. They knew where to find her. How else would they have known that she was in Washington? She wasn't trying to hide, but she left Jacksonville because she couldn't get rid of the damn media attention. It was just constant. This is maybe there was some sort of custody battle. Who knows? I mean, that's what the state has to prove is her doing this. But they're trying to make her look as guilty as possible. Is she? I don't know. We'll see.
With your 50 years of experience, the more violent the case, the less likely that the state of Florida would take you up on that offer.
With some prosecutors, yes.
Okay. That's all the question I had.
One regret.
Sure.
Mr. Cox, Mr. Mizrahi kept using the term first-degree murder. Is it your understanding that Ms. Gardner is charged as a principal in this case?
I have not been involved in any details. I've read the indictment. The indictment says first-degree murder.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Curry, I think Mr. Cox has the exhibit still.
Yep, I'll retrieve that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
May I leave, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
There you go.
Call you guys what
That
now?
was easy.
We'll call John Curry. He's by Zoom, Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. John Curry.
Do you have another microphone?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Curry, can you hear us?
I can hear you. How can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Good Lord.
All right, if you'll raise your right hand and be sworn in, please.
Do you
Bring
solemnly
that
swear
audio
or
down a little bit.
testimony you shall tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Yes, you may proceed.
Mr. Curry, thank you for your patience. Sir, you're a retired naval aviator, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're now an airline pilot, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And also, until recently, you were a lay clergy member in the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, is that right?
That's correct.
And we'll just refer to it to the church as we go through the question, okay?
Sure.
What is a ward in the church?
A ward is the name that we call a local congregation that's a division of the church that's set by a geographic boundary. So that's just the name of a congregation.
And is there a bishop over the ward?
Yes.
And what are bishop's responsibilities over a ward?
A bishop's responsibilities generally are pretty broad, but they're administrative in nature, in charge of the record keeping, finances, ensuring the ward is properly staffed to serve the congregation, as well as providing counseling and spiritual guidance to its members.
And were you bishop of a ward until recently?
I was.
Which ward?
The Jacksonville Beach Ward.
And from what years to what years were you the bishop of the Jacksonville Beach Ward?
I began bishop in the spring, April of 2018. I was most recently released in March of this year.
Sir, do you know Shanna Gardner?
I do.
And approximately when did you meet her?
It was in the spring of 2018 when I became bishop is the first time I met her.
And was she a member of your ward in 2018 when you took over?
She was a member of the ward. I believe she had just relocated into the boundaries of the ward. So she was a member shortly after I took over in 2018.
And were her records kept in your ward?
They were.
And did she ever officially resign from the church during your time as bishop of that board?
No, she did not.
Did she periodically attend services during that period of time that you were bishop?
Yes, she did.
Did she attend with her daughter at times?
That's correct, at times.
Did Ms. Gardner remain friendly with many members of the ward up until she moved from Jacksonville Beach?
Yes, as far as I'm aware.
And did that include members of your family?
Yes, that's true.
And did it include other women who were fully involved in the church?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, that is true.
And when Ms. Gardner's family from out of state would visit, would they attend your board?
Yes.
Oh,
And so in 2022, Ms. Gardner still had many connections to the church. Is that fair?
That's fair, yes.
I want to talk about baptism, sir. With regard to Ms. Gardner's children, were they registered in your ward?
They were not.
And do you know whose ward they were registered?
sorry.
Yes, they were in their father's ward, Jared Bridegan's ward.
And what does that mean that they were registered in Mr. Bridegan's ward?
It meant that their progression in the church would be under the purview of that ward and not their mother's. So the record, I would have very little purview over anything related to their membership.
And with respect to baptism in the church, do both parents need to consent to baptism?
Under some circumstances, I believe they do not. It's an administrative matter that
Jerry,
I'm not
glad you could make it.
up to right now. I'm not familiar with it enough, but generally it's not necessary from my recollection.
Now, at some point, did you become aware that Ms. Gardner's daughter desired to get baptized?
Yes.
And is it also part of church policy that a child should understand the blessing of baptism before they are baptized?
Yes, I would say that there's a minimal level of understanding that would be expected. Yes.
And
I'm learning something I didn't know.
What did Gardner ask you to do with respect to the child baptism?
She asked if it would be okay if we went ahead with some discussions to help her prepare to better understand and answer those questions.
And when you say questions, are those questions that relate to the blessing?
Just general questions about understanding what you're doing and the commitment. It's a covenant, so it's just an understanding of the covenant that you're going to be making.
And as a result of that conversation, did you arrange to have the daughter meet with missionaries?
Yes,
And did that occur?
it did.
And did that occur during the weeks that the child was living at Ms. Gardner's home in Jacksonville Beach?
Yes,
And are you aware of whether or not Ms. Gardner brought the child to these meetings?
I am aware that she did.
And did she make any attempt in any way to obstruct her child from receiving the education from the missionaries, to your knowledge?
She did not.
Did she ever show opposition to the child being educated by the missionaries in the church?
I saw no indication of that at all.
And sir, did you ever reach out to Mr. Bridegan's bishop to make that bishop aware of what you were doing with respect to providing education to the daughter?
I did.
And would you say that this was a coordinated effort
I would say that, yes.
that would culminate in the child being baptized in the church?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Nice. So pretty straightforward questions.
No questions.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you, Judge.
Well, they went through that one really quick.
Mr. Pretty,
Judge, we would call Martha Rogers.
Marla Rogers, please.
You promise for her friend, that's what you do, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Can you hear me? Yes. All right, Mr. Pretty.
Ms. Rogers, can you tell Judge Kite what city and state you live in?
I live in West Richland, Washington.
And up until she was arrested.
See if I can bring
in
up the
August
audio a
of
little bit.
2023 in West Richland, Washington, how far away from you did Shanna Gardner live?
Other side of the country.
No, prior, at the time of her arrest in August of 2020.
Oh, sorry, next door.
Mr. Pretty, the microphone.
Sorry. Next door to you?
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, what do you do for a living?
I am a self-employed baker.
Is that the same type of business that Ms. Gardner ran in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, until she moved to Washington?
Yes,
When did you meet, when I says, do you know Shanna Gardner? Do you know her?
yes.
When did you first meet her?
I met her in February of 2020.
Can you tell Judge Kite how you met her?
We both attended solo at a cookie convention.
Is that called CookieCon?
It is.
All right, and what is CookieCon generally?
It is a place for cookie artists to go and learn and be creative within the cookie world.
And did that help
Making
facilitate your
cookies.
business as well as Ms. Gardner's business?
It did.
And you said that was 2020. Was that before the COVID shutdown?
It was
How far before?
about 2 weeks prior.
Now, during this
Hi,
CookieCon
Roxanne.
2020, how quickly
Good to
did you and
see
Ms.
you.
Gardner become friends?
Very quickly.
Roxanne.
And then after that, I imagine you returned to Washington and she returned to Florida.
Correct.
And did you continue to talk to her during COVID?
We did.
Now, were you and Ms. Gardner planning to attend CookieCon in March of 2022?
We were.
And did Shanna end up attending CookieCon in March of 2022?
God.
And why not, if you know?
This was after the death
Just
of
let him
the
testify.
twins'
That is
father,
normal.
and she wanted to
Ooh.
stay behind to be with them.
Well, here's the there's a possibility that it wasn't about. I think that he's left the church since then. He used to be a ward, and it was, and I think it was just a place where, because they were saying some of their reasoning behind bringing this is they were having disputes about the daughter's baptism, that he wanted to have the daughter baptized, she didn't. The same reason that they brought up the other guy is because, hey, they're saying this, and these are just disputing these things that they brought up, saying, well, they had a horrible, and all these things were going on, and they're just basically trying to debunk all of the things that they're saying about her.
But prior to that, had you and her had several conversations about her coming to CookieCon?
Correct.
In
And
your
also, I
world,
think
is
he's not
CookieCon
part of the
big deal?
church anymore.
It's a huge deal.
Had Ms. Gardner registered and paid for the hotel?
I believe so, yes.
Ma'am, I want to talk to you about August of 2022. Did you visit Jacksonville Beach, Florida in August of 2022?
With my family and myself, yes, we went.
Was the purpose of that visit to see Ms. Gardner and her family?
It was a family vacation for us to see her, yes.
Where did you stay?
We stayed at the Gardner's Beach House.
Is that the house on
nice.
Ocean Drive?
Yes.
And
But you
during
think-
your visit here in Jacksonville, did you and Ms. Gardner have discussions about how her business was doing financially?
We did.
And did she tell you that essentially she lost all her business because of social media?
Correct.
Out of that conversation, was there a second conversation about her moving to Washington State?
We joked about it because there was a house being built next door to me. And from the time that I met her, we talked about starting a business together. And
Nice.
so I brought up that there was a house next door and I'd love for her to be my neighbor.
Okay, so sort of joking with her, but telling her she should come out and be your neighbor.
Yeah.
And work with you.
Correct.
Well, that'd be nice.
Now, you're aware that her son, you know her children, correct?
I do.
And they lived next door to you for over a year at this point.
Correct.
And one of her son actually has a heart condition and can only live at certain sea levels, correct?
Under 1,000,
And what is the elevation of West Richland, Washington?
approximately 600.
So the child, that's one of the places the child can move.
It would be a safe place.
And after you had left and returned to Washington, did Miss Gardner end up coming out to Washington, to West Richland?
She did.
How soon after?
After our vacation,
Correct.
approximately a couple weeks.
And did you see her during that visit?
I did.
What did she do?
She looked at the house. We looked at schools, and we just a variety of the things that you would do when you move into a new area.
And as a result of that visit, did she decide to move to West Richland and become your neighbor?
She did.
Now, between when you met Miss Gardner in 2020 and when she flew out to Washington State, have you ever had any conversations with her? Did she ever seem willing to leave Florida?
No,
Now, after Miss Gardner moved to West Richland,
Frank.
did she help you in your cookie business?
she did.
Good to see you.
And did you interact with her regularly?
I did.
How often?
Daily.
Did you go over to her house?
I would.
Did she go over to your house?
She would.
And you were aware that there was a search warrant on her home, the home next door to yours, in February of 2023.
Correct.
And then I imagine you became aware that her Ms. Strange's husband, Mario Fernandez, was arrested in March of 2023, correct?
Correct.
And was there a period of time that Ms. Gardner had left West Richland and returned back to the southeast?
Yes.
Now, in all of your dealings with Ms. Gardner since she moved to Washington up until her arrest in Washington in August of 2023, did you ever see anything that indicated to you that Ms. Gardner was going to flee?
Absolutely not.
How about evade arrest?
No.
Did you ever know her to engage in any type of criminal behavior as your neighbor?
Absolutely not.
Was she threatening in any way to you?
No.
Did you ever see her be threatening to any of your neighbors?
No.
Had she established herself in the Washington community?
She had.
And can you tell the judge how some of the things she did to establish herself?
She always put her kids first, and one of those being in her children's activities, particularly AB, who loves gymnastics, and so she was very involved in that community.
And as far as your street, where you all live, did she have a reputation among the neighbors?
A good reputation.
Ma'am, have you had an opportunity to see Ms. Gardner parent her children?
I have.
And with regard to her son, for lack of a better term, at times can be challenging, correct?
Most preteens can.
And have you been able to observe that Ms. Gardner has been able to connect with her son better than other people?
Absolutely.
Would you say they share a special bond?
They do.
Thank you, Ms. Rocky.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ruggie.
Good afternoon.
So would you agree that Ms. Gardner helped you in your business?
She did.
Would you consider her a savvy businesswoman?
Yes.
Did she give you ideas about how to make your business more profitable?
Yes, I would say that. Sure.
And you didn't know her at all before 2020.
No, sir.
So typically when people have that bond, like you said, that quick bond, they tend to learn about their history.
Yes.
And so did Ms. Gardner share with you her history with regard to Mr. Bridegan?
Yes, sir.
What did she say about their divorce and their custody issues and things like that?
I'm sorry.
What did she tell you about the divorce and the custody issues and things like that?
I can't remember specifically, but I'm a child of divorce, so I quickly could relate to what she was going through.
Okay, so you don't remember any specifics?
Other normal, I would say.
Was she ever frustrated with Mr. Bridegan, things he was doing?
Possibly, but nothing in specific as far as conversations or things. But I guess my point being, yes, I could say that she was frustrated.
Well, sure, but nothing like what you saw in the text messages in terms of threatening to kill him or anything like that.
No.
What did you know about Mario Fernandez Saldana?
That he was her husband. I don't know much about him.
Did you ever meet him?
I met him once when we came in August of 2022.
Same question about his relationship with Bridegan. Did you know anything about that?
No.
Wow.
When you heard about the death of Jared Bridegan, did you hear that from the defendant?
Yes.
And when did she tell you that?
Maybe the day after it happened, or a couple days later. I couldn't be certain.
And no one's going to hold you to the specific time. It was relatively close.
Yes.
It wasn't like weeks or months later.
No, sir.
And what did she tell you?
I'm sorry.
What did she tell you?
That she would not be attending CookieCon, that she would be staying home because of the event had happened.
Did she tell you any details about the event?
No, she did not.
Did you ask?
No, I did not.
Did you ever, in subsequent discussions with Ms. Gardner, ask about what she thought had happened?
Maybe months later, but not right after it happened.
So tell me about the months later.
She just mentioned that she wouldn't have known what had happened, that they didn't talk to the same people, maybe just theories, but nothing that I could recall specifically.
Did she ever utter a word about suspecting that Mario was involved?
No, sir.
Did she ever utter a word to you suspecting that Kirsten Bridegan, the current wife, was involved?
No, sir.
Did she ever utter anything about drug dealers or gangs or anything like that?
No, sir.
She basically said, I have no idea.
No, sir.
That's,
Yes.
yes, okay. Did she ever mention Henry Tennant?
No.
Did you have any discussions with her after Mr. Tennant's arrest for driving on a suspended license?
No.
Did you ask her why she had a PR firm?
We did talk about that because of the harassment that she had received from social media.
And how was the PR firm going to help her with harassment from social media?
I didn't ask specific questions to that.
What is your relationship with Ms. Gardner now?
In my eyes, she's still my neighbor and still a friend.
Well, during her incarceration, she's not your neighbor, so what is your relationship during her incarceration? Since she's been incarcerated?
A friend?
Do you talk to her daily?
No, not daily.
Do you communicate with her over the tablet, phone calls, and things like that?
When I'm able to, or she's able to.
That's all the question.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you.
Call you next witness.
Your Honor, we call Megan White.
Megan White, please.
Megan White. So Megan looks like.
Someone swear affirm testimony you give should be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I thought that cop was going to slap her.
Mr. Craddy?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. White, where do you live?
I live in Alpine, Utah.
And what is your relationship with Shannon Gardner?
I'm her older sister.
And can you please explain to Judge Kite where you fit in the Gardner family?
Shelly and my dad got married when I was 5. So I'm from a previous marriage.
And how many kids do Shelley and Sterling have together?
They have 4, 5 counting me.
And are they all daughters?
Yes,
And where does Shanna fit into the 5 of you?
she's the baby.
Have you maintained a close relationship with your sister Shanna since she became an adult?
Yes,
And you have a niece and nephew through Shanna the twins.
I do.
And they're now 12 years old, is that right?
Correct.
And there are a few subjects I
Damn.
want to talk to you about for the purposes of this motion to set a bond for your sister. And the first is Shanna's move to Washington State in the fall of 2022. So let's go back in earlier 2022. Had you visited your sister Shanna here?
Hey, Roscoe, want to come on?
We came to Orlando that year,
Chilling,
and
right?
she came with the kids to see us.
And were you aware as to whether or not in 2022 your parents, Shanna or Sterling Shelley, whether or not they had bought a house in Jacksonville Beach?
Yes,
And was that a discussion amongst the family that they were buying that house?
yes.
And what did the family call
No,
the
it's
house?
not.
The beach
We're
house.
good.
What was the purpose
Lot of rain.
of the family buying the beach house?
So that when we came to Jacksonville to visit, we'd be able to stay there.
And was that located at 2709 Ocean Drive in Jacksonville Beach?
Yes,
That house was purchased shortly after Jared Bridegan was killed in February of 2022, correct?
correct.
But the family still bought
Yes,
it. And did the family also buy a minivan
yes, they did.
to keep at the beach house?
Yes,
Can you tell the judge why they bought a minivan?
to cart many people back and forth from the airport to the beach house to Shauna's house, wherever we needed to go.
And was it the intent of the family to have the beach house to essentially facilitate visiting Shanna here in Jacksonville?
Yes,
Prior to early fall of 2022, did you ever expect your sister Shanna to move from Jacksonville Beach?
No.
And why did you not expect her to move?
because she stated she had roots here. She wasn't interested in leaving. She had a business. There was no reason for her to go.
And did that hold true even shortly after Jared Bridegan had been killed?
Yes,
And because you actually came to Jacksonville shortly after Jared
Good
Bridegan.
to see you, Cynthia.
Is that correct?
yes,
Can you tell Judge Kite the circumstances under which you came to Jacksonville?
yes. I and a lot of my family came for the memorial for Jared.
And when you mean memorial, what are you speaking about?
The event that Shanna planned, so that the children could have time to mourn their father and have closure.
And the extended Gardner family, or many of them flew in for that?
Yes,
And was it organized?
it was very organized.
Who organized it?
Shanna
Where did it take place?
at the beach house.
Was there a photographer there?
Yes,
Why was there a photographer there?
because Shanna felt because the kids were so young, she wanted them to remember that day. She wanted them to have a reference of that day
About their father?
about their father.
Now, I want to fast forward to fall of 2022. Had things changed for Shanna in Jacksonville Beach?
Yes,
What had changed?
her business was failing. The kids were, other kids at school were saying things to her kids that were not nice. She was being bullied by the media. The children were not feeling safe, and neither was she.
And ma'am, we heard from Marla Rogers, but her son, your nephew, has a heart condition.
Yes,
How does that limit where he can live?
he can't go anywhere above 1,000 feet elevation.
But one of the places he could go was West Richland, Washington, where Marla Rogers lived.
Yes,
And Miss Gardner ended up moving to West Richland, Washington. Is that right?
that's correct.
Did you facilitate that?
I drove with her cross country
In what vehicle?
in the minivan that was purchased here in Jacksonville.
And did Miss Gardner do anything, or did you make any observations of Miss Gardner as you all left the state of Florida?
Yes, as we were crossing the Florida line, she became very emotional and started crying.
Did she have any outbursts or say anything when she was crying?
I asked her why she was crying, and she said that she was heartbroken because this was her home, and she felt like she was being run out of her home.
Now, after Shanna was arrested in August of 2023, who had been the primary caregivers for her children?
She had been.
And after her arrest?
After her arrest, my dad and Shelley.
And how old is your father?
He's 74,
And how old is Mrs. Gardner?
62.
And have they essentially moved to Washington State?
Yes,
Do you fly out to Washington State from Utah to assist them?
I do.
About how often?
It's worked out to be about every other month for a week.
Man,
When you go out there and essentially, I imagine you're giving your parents a break, is it?
Yes,
When you go out and give your parents a break, have you observed the impact on the twins by their limited contact with Miss Gardner?
yes.
Can you tell the judge about the impact?
There have been several times when they've become upset and they've expressed wanting to speak to their mother. And because she can only speak to them certain times of the day, she's not readily available for them.
And does she have a special connection with her son?
She does.
Can you tell Judge Kite about that?
There have been times where LB has had problems when he's been struggling, and later on, when Shanna has called, we'll find that she's been having a rough day also. So it's a connection that goes beyond distance.
Now, were you ever aware that Miss Gardner had left her children in Washington and come back to the Southeast after Mr. Fernandez had been arrested?
Yes.
And what was your understanding as to why she did that?
It was to protect the kids in case she was arrested, so that she would be here to be available to turn herself in if needed.
Now, does the Gardner family have any homes out of this country?
No.
Any family that lives abroad? After, Miss Gardner, Shanna eventually returned to Washington State after many months.
Yes.
Correct? What steps did the family take after she returned to Washington with respect to the possibility of her being arrested?
There was always a member of our family with her. In the event that she was arrested, we wanted to ensure that there was someone there with the kids so that it would be as least traumatic as possible for them.
And did you perform that duty at times?
I did.
Did other family members do the same?
Yes.
Ma'am, there's been some talk about the daughter's baptism.
Yes,
Were you aware, well, let me ask this, are you a practicing member of the church?
I am.
And is most of the Gardner family a practicing member of the church?
Most of us, yes.
And Shanna still communicated with you at all times, right?
All times.
And did Shanna speak to you about her daughter being baptized?
She did.
Can you tell the judge about those conversations with her?
She sent a text to us saying that AB had chosen to be baptized. And when I spoke to her personally, we were talking about that. And she said that she just wanted to make sure that AB was conscious of the choice that she was making, that she was informed, and that she supported her 100%. And as long as she had that knowledge, as long as she had that knowledge, she was 100% on board. And it even ended up buying a baptism dress for her.
Is it Miss Gardner that you're speaking
Yes.
it's a rough one.
of?
Yes.
Ms. White, you heard the prosecutor talk about the significant resources that your parents have.
Yes.
Are those the same resources that they used to fly Shanna here after Mario had been arrested?
Yes.
And who paid for her to stay in all these Airbnbs and hotels for months?
My dad, Shelley.
And who paid to fly the kids down to see Miss Gardner during that period of time?
My dad, Shelley.
And is there a willingness on behalf of the family to invest the same resources to make sure that if Miss Gardner is given a bond, that she will remain available to the court?
Of course.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross.
Ms. White, has AB been baptized?
No.
Is AB, LB, and Ms. Gardner members of any ward in Washington?
No.
Isn't it true that your sister, Ms. Gardner, was actually very upset about the baptism dress? Because wasn't there a dispute with Kirsten Bridegan over who was going to take AB shopping for that dress?
I'm not aware of that.
Ms. Gardner has been vocal to you and her other sisters about, at the time, her jealousy as to AB's relationship with Kirsten Bridegan becoming closer. Isn't that correct?
No,
Ms. Gardner was upset and annoyed that AB's baptism was going to take place at Jared Bridegan's ward instead of her own. Isn't that correct?
I'm not aware of that.
Over the years, obviously, you were around when Shanna and Jared got divorced, and you would agree with me that it was a very acrimonious divorce.
Sure.
Your parents, in fact, don't like and did not like Jared Bridegan, correct?
Are you speaking which tense?
Both, either.
I don't think they cared for the way that he treated their daughter.
And there was a lot of litigation, and your family was greatly involved in the litigation with Shanna Gardner about protecting her money from Jared Bridegan during the divorce, correct?
I would not say that, no.
Ms. Gardner and Mario Fernandez are still married to this day, aren't they?
Sure.
Well, are they or are they not married?
I believe they are.
And Mario Fernandez was married to Shanna from 2018 till present, so he was in AB and LB's life for a while.
Correct.
Yeah.
After Mr. Fernandez and Ms. Gardner separated sometime in the summer of 2022, he has not seen the children since then. Isn't that correct?
To my knowledge, no.
Yeah.
He hasn't been to the home of West Richland, Washington.
Not to my knowledge.
And you and your family members haven't spoken to him since then.
No.
Did Ms. Gardner ever express to you or other members of the family that she had concerns that Mario Fernandez was involved in Jared's death?
I've never heard that.
She's never told you that?
No.
What about after Mario was arrested?
No.
Your family never had a conversation after her current husband was arrested for the murder of her ex-husband about his involvement?
No.
It just never came up?
I've never been a part of that, a conversation like that.
Your family has annual meetings, right, with minutes?
Yes.
Did it come up at this year's annual meeting?
No.
The death of Jared Bridegan didn't come up?
In our last meeting, no.
Has it come up at any family meetings?
Not to my knowledge.
There was no conversation with Shanna Gardner after Henry Tennant was arrested for the murder of Jared Bridegan?
About Henry Ten? No.
So before Mario Fernandez was arrested, before Ms. Gardner was arrested, Henry Tennant was arrested and publicly named as the individual who shot and killed Jared Bridegan, and Shanna Gardner never discussed that with you or the family members?
She never discussed it with me, no.
She never told you who Henry Tennant was?
She didn't have to. The media did just fine.
She never told you that she knew nothing about it, or she didn't even know Henry Tennant? No conversation at all?
No.
Judge, I'm gonna Jack asked and answered and well beyond scope of direct.
I'll get some more light. Oh,
Has she ever spoken to you, and since you're the caregivers of the children, about conversations she's had with AB and LB about their father's death?
Could you say that again?
Has she ever spoken with you about the conversations she has had with LB and AB about their father's death?
Yes.
What has she said that she's told them?
Well, I don't remember anything specific other than, answering questions that they may have.
Like, how was Mario Fernandez involved?
I'm not aware of that.
Have the children ever asked her that?
I'm not aware of that.
As the current or part-time caregiver of the children, have they ever asked you that?
No.
The children have never once asked you about what you,
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
go ahead, finish, go ahead.
the children
Yeah.
have never once asked you about what you know about Mario Fernandez's involvement in her father's death.
I would rule it, you can answer.
No.
Objection.
Have the children ever mentioned Mario in the entire time since they've left the state of Florida?
His name has come up in things that they used to do with him. As LB has mentioned a couple of times, video games that they'd play together. Beyond that, no.
You mentioned a memorial that Shanna Gardner and Mario Fernandez had for Jared Bridegan at your parents' beach house. Shelly Gardner, who's your stepmother, correct?
Yes.
She actually published those photos on her blog, So Shelly, correct?
Yeah.
And discussed the memorial on her blog, correct?
Yes.
And do you work for Stamping Up?
I do not.
Members of your family work for Stamping Up, correct?
Yes.
Stamping Up is the company that Shelly and your dad own.
Yes.
And Stamping Up released a letter about Jared Bridegan's death, didn't they?
Yes, I believe they did.
Despite the blog post about his memorial and the public letter released by her company, you're telling this court that no one in your family has ever discussed the murder of Jared Bridegan or the involvement of any of the charged parties.
Have we talked about the murder? Yes. Have we speculated? No.
Well, what have you talked about?
The fact that he was murdered?
Murdering means at the hands of another. You never discussed could possibly have been the one to murder him?
No.
I don't have any further questions.
Redirect.
Ms. White, was it a conscious effort by the family not to ask Shanna Gardner questions about her case?
Yes,
Were you aware that she had retained an attorney in 2022?
I was.
And was the entire family aware that this was going on?
Yes,
And was the family told not to discuss the case with Shanna Gardner?
we were told.
Thank you, Judge. No further questions. Thank you, Ms. White.
They should be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, how do y'all want to proceed? Formal document?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
I like this judge. Pretty solid.
Well, y'all have competing motions.
I was gonna ask you first, or whoever's doing it.
I am, Your Honor. I'll defer to the state. I think
All right, we'll have the state go
that
first.
was first.
Okay.
And I do think it's their burden with respect to the Arthur hearing, because if they don't meet their burden, or if they do meet their burden, it's over.
Okay,
This court.
yes.
Jared Bridegan was brutally murdered, ambushed on a dark, desolate road with his 2-year-old child, strapped in her car seat, her face still sticky with ice cream after dropping his children off at this woman's house. Murder. The words used by defense witnesses have been died, his death, not for a robbery, not for road rage, not any action he did, but solely because he was an inconvenience to this woman. This was a cold, calculated, premeditated murder following years of plotting and planning, manifesting, hoping, wishing, making it happen, seeking, enticing, inciting, encouraging. Shanna Gardner was not present on the scene. Nobody is saying that. She went to Walmart, she went home. There are no direct text messages that the state can find or ever will find because she planned this murder with her current husband whom she lived with. The circumstances and the circumstantial evidence in this case weigh so heavily in pointing the finger at her as the person who set this entire event into motion over years, based on this idea that she was fixated on, that she wanted freedom from Jared Bridegan, freedom to do what she wanted with the children, freedom to be in charge of her own trust, freedom to make decisions about their therapy, their medications, their religion, where they would live, what they would do, when they would do it. Despite the myriad of other alternatives available to Shanna Gardner, a woman of her resources, her education, her influence, and her power, she chose murder instead of the court system, instead of the legal system. The state of Florida and the law enforcement officers who worked tirelessly
Good
on
evening,
this case for
JKD.
years and years, not
How you
only
doing?
established evidence of this woman's guilt, but they
I mean,
eliminated
the ultimate
every
sense,
other
we all go
violent
to Walmart.
suspect. The state of Florida certainly, practically on the face of this planet, that would have any reason to target and ambush Jared Bridegan. Because again, this isn't road rage, this isn't a gang initiation, this isn't a drug deal gone bad, this isn't an affair or a drug debt.
How do you know?
Or beef with somebody. This was somebody hiding in the woods on a dark night, waiting for this man to move a tire from the middle of the road and gunning him down in cold blood while his daughter sat in a car seat covering her eyes with her jelly shoes. And the evidence the court has to look at in this case is the circumstances surrounding this. She was her own worst enemy and her own greatest witness against herself because she was so vocal for so long about wanting this to happen, about how
What
much
did you miss?
she hated Jared, and the people she spoke to about her
All of
plan
it.
are people that she thought she could trust, that would never take a stand against her, or people she thought wouldn't
I
be
see Aaron.
It is not easy to find someone or hire someone or solicit someone to kill someone. There are no yellow pages for it. There's no attorney she can call them, someone to refer her like they referred her to an Airbnb to hide out to before she surrenders herself. The people she asked were people that she knew. A trainer from a gym that I had an affair with. A tattoo artist and a tenant of my husband who has a criminal record. People that she, in her mind, believes to be involved in the criminal justice system. The only people in her circle, in her world, that she thinks without any kind of knowledge about doing this type of activity, because everyone else in her world is equally educated, equally influenced, equally affluent, and not involved in this corner of life. Her own words and her actions preceding this homicide and her actions after this homicide are the proof evident presumption great of her guilt. We filed a motion to deny her bail under the Florida Constitution and Arthur, as well as the pretrial detention statute. We have met our burden today. We presented live testimony. The state of Florida could have presented affidavits, put our detective on the stand to prove that heightened level, that heightened burden with a heightened presentation of case, subjecting her to cross-examination. And we have proved that she has committed the charges against her as a conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, solicitation to commit first-degree murder, as a principal to
You haven't proven shit.
as well as a principal to child abuse. The principal instruction in Florida is just that she had a conscious intent the death of Jared Bridegan occur, and that she did some act or said something that was intended to and did incite, cause, encourage, assist, or advise other people to carry out this homicide. Again, she had no dealings directly with Henry Tennant. There are no communications the state of Florida has, or even if we had, that we could use at trial between her and Mario Fernandez because they stayed married to this day. What we have is a tremendous circumstantial case against her based on her words and her actions. Circumstances that she incited, because we will never have direct evidence of that unless Mario Fernandez-Aldana decides to become state cooperator. Those being that this woman is the only person in the world that had this level of resentment, hatred, and motivation to ambush, eliminate Jared Bridegan. That she wanted to have total control and freedom over the decisions in rearing their children. That she spoke at her interview with Jacksonville Beach Police about her resentment for how he was during their marriage, and some resentment for how she felt that he was acting now. As you know, now he's turned the corner. Now he's the perfect husband. Now he's the perfect father. And that freedom, that motivation is evident based on where everybody ended up. Because Henry Tennant, no doubt, pulled the trigger and killed Jared Bridegan. He's confessed to it. He says he did it. He says Mario Fernandez solicited him, paid him, provided the firearm, drove him there, was on scene when he murdered Jared Bridegan.
Okay.
There is no motivation for Henry Tennant to do this crime without being incited, encouraged, or...
Well, that's completely different than her. Okay. See, this is where I think a lot of her stuff falls apart, because she's saying, well, if Fernandez, if he's saying that Fernandez paid him, solicited him to do all of this, well, then that means that they've got no proof that she's tied to it. Just saying, got no proof that she's tied to it, other than that it's her current husband. But does that make her guilty? I don't know. You decide.
assisted by Shanna Gardner and Mario Fernandez. And there is no motive for Mario Fernandez to do this without the encouragement and solicitation and permission.
Oh, that's a large stretch. That's just taking away all agency from him. I mean, let me give you a different theory. Fernandez didn't like Daddy involved. Daddy's in, the father of the children is involved, and he's just sick of it. He's like, I got better things to do. Can you get rid of this guy for me? And then solicits him on his own. Or there's a possibility he said some snide remark. This guy took it the wrong way and said, I got you covered. And then just goes and does the deed on his own. See, I don't know what happened that night or leading up to this, but apparently we know who the pew-pewer is.
Shanna Gardner. The most damning evidence we have comes from Shanna Gardner's own statements to her best friend, a woman she trusts with her life, a woman she talks to 5 or 6 times a day, a woman she tells the most intimate, mundane details of her life, a woman that tagged herself, quote, Team Shanna, a woman who was dragged to grand jury, was withholding, minimizing, refusing to tell police about text messages, all because she wanted to protect her best friend. The statements that she did give the state of Florida and law enforcement, likely just the tip of the iceberg of what this woman actually knows. And she wasn't bullied, she wasn't threatened, there was no show of force as suggested in defense cross-examination that we put her in a patrol car, put a bunch of posters in front of her face and made her tell us what we wanted to hear. What she told us is in black and white in these text messages. She said it at the grand jury under oath, and she said it again. And she's going to say it on that stand at the trial. That days before Jared Bridegan was ambushed, targeted, murdered, with no other suspects and no other motivation, that this woman sat across from Mario Fernandez in Hawaii and told her, if you really don't want me to do this, you need to tell me how. The evidence that she said yes is so overwhelming because the ultimate result, the consequence speaks to the action. He would not have done this. He would not have gone to Henry Tennant, given him the gun, and done this action if she hadn't said yes. Because in the end, she got what she wanted. She and Mario Fernandez stayed married, but they went their separate ways. She got control of her trust. She got to move to Washington. She has her children. No one's interfering with her now. She's got no, even her current husband, ex-husband, Bridegan family, nobody's interfering with her choices regarding her children. She ended up on top. Henry Tennant got $5,000. Mario Fernandez got
Stick of
the
daddy.
sale and got to remain in a marriage and go on a separate way. But the person who benefited in the end, one of the jury instructions we tell jurors to look at. What benefit, favorable treatment, what do they get out of their testimony? It's the same motivation as to why this crime is committed. Who ended up with everything they wanted to Shanna Gardner, and that speaks to her being the one that put this whole thing into action. She has a pecuniary interest in this without Jared Bridegan having any legal entanglements her because he's deceased. She now can control her trust. There are years of incitement, and I anticipate and I understand. Maybe if there were some remote text messages that were joking from 2015, everybody jokes about their ex. I get that. Everybody in this courtroom gets it. There's nobody here who hasn't said something at some point in a joking manner, like these text messages about the insurance for the medicine or the little, I'm not going to say the word, referring to her son. But those people didn't end up dead. They didn't end up dead 10 minutes after leaving her house, less than a mile from leaving her house, shot at the hands of a person who's renting a home from her company that's funded by her trust, implicating her current husband. There's no one unlucky or that naive in this world that this woman didn't know about this, wanted to happen, and cover up everything that happened afterwards. She attempted to solicit other people. She
have to prove this. He hasn't done this.
Hitman. It was, I'm not joking. I'm serious. Your Honor, can read the text. Do you think M would do it? Do you think H would do it? There are days in a row where she's saying, should I talk to him? Should I reach out to him? Should I ask him? She tells the brother of the victim, I want to hire a hitman, and she's serious. She tells a tattoo artist because she probably, in her world, thinks a tattoo artist knows hitmen, if he knows anybody. Years and years and years and years go by, and defense counsel brought up a great point, which is this all stopped sometime in 2017. Well, that's when she meets Mario Fernandez Aldana, and he tells her, I've got a military background. By the way, I know 4 guys who can break into Jared's house, make it look like an accident, no one will ever know, or make it look like a burglary, no one will ever know.
Hey, Christine. Hey, Draxie. Good to see you.
The money paid to Henry Tennant to complete this task is drawn from an LLC that she, Mario Fernandez, jointly controlled, funded by her trust fund. And the $5,000 payment for the murder, he got $2,000, $3,000 for actual legitimate work. He was paid $5,000 for a Kickstarter for a pallet business, which was actually the first down payment on what would be a funneling of funds through him over time to repay him.
Oh.
When Your Honor looks back at those wire calls, Shanna Gardner is telling her PR firm and Kim Jensen that, oh, this guy Henry Tennant, they arrested for murder. There's one thing they could twist against me. It's that we gave him $5,000 last year. It is very telling to this court, and should show her mind and her knowledge, that she only mentioned that $5,000. She didn't mention the $2,000 and the $3,000. Those are for legitimate work. She knows the $5,000 is what they're going to twist because she knows that was the $5,000 earmarked for the hit. There's
not what it is.
I'm going to anticipate there's no question that Mario Fernandez did this in conjunction with Henry Tennant. Henry Tennant gave a sworn statement saying as much. He's taken his plea of guilty to murder, second-degree murder. The children, there are some disputes about whether he was there or not there. Henry Tennant says he was there driving the truck. And Henry Tennant was on foot. Somebody was driving that truck. And Jacksonville Beach police eliminated everybody else other than Mario Fernandez Aldana. By the way, Henry Tennant has said this after they've already found evidence of Mario Fernandez's involvement. Because it's corroborated. But Henry Tennant didn't know what evidence Jacksonville Beach police had when he gave his statement. He pled at his first court date. There's going to be an argument that these are just words that the court shouldn't look at this as her responsibility, that she didn't assist Fernandez or she had no part of this, had no knowledge of it. Her actions are strong indications.
Well, that's pretty good defense.
Conscious of guilt. It shows her as a willing participation in this. There was no renunciation of this. She sat in front of detectives with the Jacksonville Beach Police Department, April 15th of 2022, and told them, I don't know what happened to Jared. Maybe it was a gang initiation. Maybe it was a drug deal gone bad. Maybe Kirsten Bridegan killed him. All while sitting there knowing that for the past 3.5 years,
how do you know?
Telling her every time they have a fight that he'll take care of Jared. That Mario Fernandez has been telling her that he would run him off the road, that he would follow him through his stairwell, that he was having a hard time taking care
Where's
of it.
your proof of this? You haven't provided any proof of this.
And then days before Jared's murder, Mario said they're in Hawaii, if you don't want me to do this now, you need to tell me.
When did that come out? I might have missed that. Who said
Yeah.
that? Who would testify to that?
Ms. Jensen.
Okay.
Kim Jensen, these are all statements that Kim Jensen gave to law enforcement.
Oh, Ms. Jensen. Gotcha.
July of 2023. and she testified to it as
Okay.
testified to Detective Johns on redirect at the grand jury in February of 2023.
So that was
Really?
grand jury testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
For which part?
The Hawaii statement.
The white
The Hawaii,
The what?
Hawaii statement.
The Hawaii statement.
That's what I'm gonna term it, the Hawaii statement.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
She's being interviewed as a witness. She doesn't bring up any of this information, which is extremely germane and extremely of interest to investigators, and in fact, affirmatively sends them down a different path, bringing up these other theories. There's evidence that ring camera footage that Gardner and Fernandez were provided the search warrant for Ring by Ring. I won't say inadvertently, but it should not have been done, and that there was footage that should have been there based on the habit of life of the recording device itself and what the investigators knew about the movements of the children that night and about other recordings they were able to find. There was discussion between Ms. Gardner and Ms. Jensen regarding the ring. That discussion came days after Henry Tennant was arrested on unrelated charges.
Okay.
Of messages in her phone and in her cloud, messages that the detective testified were present in Kim Jensen's phone and not present in Ms. Gardner's phone.
But see, here's the problem. He wasn't arrested. He was arrested on unrelated charges, but they were following him around because he was a suspect in it. And they were following him around to see where he was going. They already had picked him out of the vehicle. They already figured out what was going on. So she's lying right here. That's not entirely true. I mean, it is true that they did arrest him under other charges. They were just waiting on him to screw up so they'd have a reason to arrest him. Then they started questioning him, and then they get him into the room, and it goes silent for hours. It's not recorded what he said. So we only have the detective's words of what he said. Wild, isn't it?
And by the way, these messages provided by defense counsel about killing the insurance salesperson and her own children were not deleted. Because she didn't really mean them. She deleted the text message about killing Jared Bridegan because she really didn't mean that. She had different phones. I know there's going to be a ton of argument that she was advised to do this by attorneys, that it's not her fault, none of this is consciousness of guilt, but she's calling us a burner phone. Her own children are telling detectives, are you looking for mommy's burner phone? She's talking to Kim Jensen on the wire intercept about evading law enforcement interception of their communications. And she's not talking about it in the context of, let's talk about some embarrassing, intimate things about my life. They're talking about it in the context of Henry Tennant, truck, payments, the PR firm. Those are the subject matters where they stop talking and say, maybe we shouldn't talk about this on the phone. Maybe we should try FaceTime. Maybe we should try something else. There's an innocent explanation for everything individually. There's a totality of circumstances that you look at. No innocent person would talk this way, act this way, do the things she did, not do the things she did, and not say the things that she didn't say.
Well, that's speculation.
Trip to Canada. I mean, that's what the children said. He's going camping in Canada. But there was no dispute from the detective that Mario Fernandez started driving up the East Coast, that he had no pre-planned, prepaid hotel rooms.
Didn't you just say he was in another truck?
In hotel rooms spur of the moment, buying toiletries. And then when he's speaking to Shanna Gardner as her children are being interviewed by CPT, and when they leave, and she's able to have an opportunity to be alone with them, she calls them, and all of a sudden he turns and comes back home. All of this together adds up to a consciousness of guilt that shows that she knew this was going to happen. She wanted it to happen. She encouraged it to happen. And she ended up pleased with the results because she got everything she wanted. She didn't tell anyone about this.
I don't think she's proven it.
From Mario Fernandez on August 18, 2022 about Henry Tennant in a broken truck, and call Jacksonville Beach Police and tell them, hey, there's this guy, he's got a truck, you should look at him. No, she called her PR firm, worried about what they were going to charge him with. She told Kim Jensen on a wiretap that she was worried what Tennant was going to tell investigators and what Tennant was going to tell the police about the payment. And how he was going to throw them under the bus for what he did because they were involved.
That's so.
Detective John said that Kim Jensen admitted at a grand jury and on that meeting in July of 2023 that Shanna Gardner had disclosed to her she knew about Amanda Henry. She had met him before. She knew he had a broke down truck like the one the police were looking for on the news. And in the wire, the first call she makes when she's confronted by media after the planned leak that a big break was coming, or an arrest was coming, her first reaction is that of a guilty person, which is she tells Kim Jensen, I didn't want to know anything else about it. I turned from the reporter and ran away. I got in my car. I left. Journal here on the wire recording. It's in evidence. Should I give Mario meaning Fernandez Saldana, a man that she is separated from and hasn't spoken to in months and has no plans to resume her relationship with. Should I give Mario a heads up about this big break in the case? I could go to Marla Rogers' house and use her phone so that they can't hear it, so that they can't find it. That's because she wanted to give Mario a warning. One of us is about to get arrested. Someone's about to get arrested. We've been caught.
Yeah. No, somebody's about to get arrested.
The financials, the financial trail back to her.
That is not an admission of guilt.
The fact that she used code words when she's talking about this. If this was a joke, there's no code words and deletions.
Sure there is. There's always
time
some.
to evade a wiretap. The evidence does establish proof evident presumption great that she was a principal to first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit capital murder, solicitation to commit capital murder, and child abuse. Because she knew BB would be in that car. She was in that car every week for date night. It's important for this court, under Arthur and under pretrial detention statute, to look at the legislative intent. Under Arthur, this court could deny bond to somebody accused of armed robbery or any other first-degree felony, even with no criminal record. Not only is this the highest crime that someone can be charged with, first-degree premeditated murder, she's been charged with first-degree premeditated capital murder. There's a death notice filed. This is not just a dangerous felony. This is not just a first-degree felony. This is not just premeditated murder. It's cold, calculated premeditated murder. It's contemporaneous violence. It's pecuniary gain. We've established through the testimony of Detective Johns not only proof evident presumption great and substantial probability of her guilt, but of the aggravators as well. That she knew Bexley Bridegan would be in that vehicle for contemporaneous violence, that pecuniary gain, she knew that if Jared Bridegan were dead, she could control her own trust, that she could move where she wanted and have her freedom financially and with the children, and that this was cold, calculated, premeditated, because there were attempts by Mario Fernandez and Henry Tennant on prior occasions, and they've been talking about this for years. And the actual
Years and years.
Fernandez, they've been talking about for months. The amount of money they promised Henry Tennant, $150,000,
Ever and ever.
was going to come from her trust. There was no way
You gotta give
Mario
me something
Fernandez
more
could
than
promise
this
that
one,
money
right?
without her blessing, because he had to get it from somewhere.
Give me a little something more.
Under Florida statute 907-041, we talk about the evidence of danger to the community, flight risk, and integrity of the judicial process. I know the defense has elicited testimony and will make argument that she was willing to turn herself in. Her attorney sent an email to the state of Florida saying, let me know, I'll turn her in. And she moved to Washington to be with a friend and live in a nice house. Just because they offer to turn her in doesn't mean that she can move all around the country secretly and then turn around and say, well, you knew where to find me the whole time. Law enforcement had to actively track.
If they're telling her where she's at, like, they have no problem saying where she's ready, willing, and able to turn herself in. If you need her to turn her in, come for it. Oh no. They had to actually track her. We have to find her. Where did she go? Which way is Waldo? I don't know. Which way did Waldo go?
And seek this woman to find her. It's not like her attorney is emailing us. She's nearby. She's in Tallahassee. She's in Savannah. If you're looking for her, she's not in Washington. She moved across the country to a house purchased for her by her parents through an LLC. That's a lot of steps for law enforcement to find her. To find where
It's not.
Again, this money, these resources, this wealth that this family has that she has access to can be funneled through all of these companies, LLCs, shell companies. It would be impossible.
Oh, shell
to
companies
activate
now.
This many resources in this many ways to move money. They were going to move the money to Henry
It's a little
Tennant
bit like
through
defamation.
shell,
Really.
through
Hey,
palaces.
Zach,
They were
good
gonna
to
seize
see
the
you.
business, and that's how they were going to make these payments. A lot of this money through for this hit.
Ah,
Integrity of the judicial process, that's in the statute. If out on bond, this defendant has access, influence, and power over key witnesses and key evidence in this case. There's already been testimony that she has deleted evidence, that she is calling Kim Jensen when she's on her way to grand jury, when she's on her way to the state attorney's office, that she's having her attorney call her. Her children are witnesses in this case. She has access now to her children in a way that can be monitored, but she would have access to her children and over whatever they say, don't say, and know and don't know about the testimony they're going to give.
oh,
She got burner phones. Her parents are witnesses.
burner
Her family
phones,
members
huh?
are witnesses. The state has serious concerns in this.
Or how about a phone that just can't be tracked because the media is looking for her?
Lastly, again, this is the most serious criminal offense there
I don't
is,
know.
capital murder. The evidence shows she's been plotting this over the years. She exercised or showed a cold disregard for the safety of BB. The sheer depth and breadth and relentlessness of this plot, what she was willing to do and try to get other people to do and got other people to do, shows that she is dangerous per se by the resulting action.
Per se.
The consequence of her actions. whatever explanation for every individual action or every individual statement or every individual text over years and years and years and years that can be argued, there is no escaping that she set this event in motion, that
It's
without
just
her,
not
none
proven
of this would
this.
have happened.
This is the problem.
She may not have pulled the trigger, but she has Jared Bridegan's blood on her hands nonetheless. We're
No, she
asking the court to
doesn't.
grant the state's motion to deny her bail.
All right, thank you. I just,
Let's hear what
I just want to
defense
clarify
has
one
to
thing,
say.
Ms. Stifler. When I look back at my notes, what I wrote is that her family has an annual trip to Hawaii, and approximately a week before the murder, that Ms. Gardner and Ms. Fernandez went on the trip. They returned 4 days before the murder. And then I have KJ text something about Fernandez, that Ms. Gardner was frustrated with Fernandez, and Fernandez was going to kill to save the marriage. Is that what you're saying was in the grand jury, or is that a text message?
I believe that Detective Johns testified as to many statements Kim Jensen made orally in the grand jury. Those were not in a text. The statement that Kim Jensen testified to at grand jury, and again reiterated to law enforcement officers in July 2023, was that Mario told her in Hawaii, if you don't want me to do this, meaning take care of, kill Jared Bridegan, you need to let me know now. And that was days before he was murdered, and that was a statement she did not disclose to me.
That could be unrelated.
From Ms. Gardner. Everything that
That could have been completely unrelated. Now, there's no proof that this is what he was talking about. I mean, this is a far stretch. I mean, it could have been that he was talking about, having some sort of booty sex, or who knows? Who knows what he was talking about? This is a far stretch to say, oh, that's exactly what it was about. You sure? You're positive? You have to put it into context. We've seen how people take shit out of context all the time.
Ms. Jensen testified to at grand jury, told to the law enforcement, were disclosures made to her by Shannon Gardner.
Buns, no meat. Who knows?
Not for that, no ma'am. The statement about Mario Fernandez saying that he needed to save his marriage and do this to save his marriage, that was an oral statement testified to by Detective Johns from Henry Tennant's sworn statement. Henry Tennant said,
from Henry Tennant's sworn statement, we're talking about the guy that pulled the trigger. That's what he's saying. Okay, now I have questions, because that makes no sense whatsoever. If you're saying that this is because Henry Tennant's the man that pulled the trigger, according to him, he pulled the trigger, and he's saying that it was because so-and-so told him such and such he had to do this to save his marriage. Is that true? Or is he trying to cover his ass? Well, bring someone down with him. Maybe they had issues. I don't know. We'll see.
Mario Fernandez came to me and said, this needs to happen now.
I do have that note earlier, but I thought the Hawaii trip, there was no text message.
No text message. That was from grand jury testimony and then her oral statements to law enforcement in July of 2023.
All right, thank you. And I'll let the defense comment on that if you see things differently.
Yes, do you have a brief sidebar?
Yes.
Damn it.
Our team. That's railroad.
See.
Community from risk of physical harm.
All right, let's see what he has to say.
All right, Mr. Brady.
Yes, Judge.
Mhm.
The state told you that this was a circumstantial evidence case, and we agree. The only difference is that we believe the evidence they have is both stale and weak. I want to remind the court that Article 1, Section 14 of the Florida Constitution says that the standard for an Arthur hearing is proof of guilt is evidence or the presumption is great. And if the state does not carry that burden, the defendant shall be entitled to release on reasonable conditions. If no conditions of release can reasonably protect the community from risk of physical harm to persons, assure the presence of the accused at trial, or assure the integrity of the judicial process, then the accused may, it's not a shall, it's a may, be detained. The state burden of persuasion here Proof evident or presumption great is higher than proof beyond a reasonable doubt for the state to obtain a conviction at trial. That's Thorntman versus Junior, 338 Southern 3rd 207. That's the Florida Supreme Court, 2022. And to quote the United States Supreme Court judge, no right is held more sacred or is more carefully guarded by the common law than the right of every individual to the possession and control of her person, free from all restraint or interference of others, unless by clear and unquestionable authority of the law. And that is Union Pacific Railroad versus Botsford, 141 U.S. 250, 1891. And that is routinely cited by Florida appellate courts that are reviewing habeas petitions on bond. Judge, I also want to direct your attention to Rule 3.132, the pretrial detention statute. And that statute says, a final order of pretrial detention shall not be based exclusively on hearsay evidence. And I would say that everything that Ms. Stifler just argued to get over the standard is hearsay.
I would agree.
To be honest, Detective Johns was not credible, and you can't even believe his hearsay. They didn't bring you firsthand evidence, and they could have. They could have called Kim Jensen to the stand for you, Your Honor. They could have admitted Kim Jensen's grand jury testimony.
Yep.
They chose to call a detective who couldn't even get his facts right.
Oh.
You heard that he told this court that Mr. Byrd interpreted that comment by Ms. Gardner back that she made in 2016 or 2015, whatever it was, that meant murder. Well, Mr. Bias showed him the report where Mr. Byrd told the detectives. I didn't take it to mean anything at the time. He told the court that there was no way that Ms. Gardner would have known about the blue truck in January when she made that controlled call that the court has, or even in August when she called her PR team. Within an hour after Mr. Tennant is arrested, detectives are at the house on Potomac Avenue that Mr. Fernandez owns, and they're telling the tenant there, Mr. Ordway, hey, your buddy Tennant's blue truck was used in the murder of Bridegan. And that wasn't the first time they were at that house. The detective told you that. And the detective also told you during cross-examination that after that, Mr. Ordway called Mr. Fernandez right away. And that sets up the link that Ms. Gardner now has all this information because the state told you that they live together and they talk. So that is not that Ms. Gardner had this information back in April when she spoke to the police. It's not that she had it back in March when she spoke to the police and she just withheld it. But if you're Ms. Gardner and you have a PR team and you have a lawyer by August of 2022, what do? You reach out to them and listen to the wires because that's indicative of the conversation she has with these people. They never tell her to go to the police.
No, they don't.
So you can't penalize her, and it doesn't move the needle at all that she's guilty because she follows the advice of professionals.
Yep, that's true.
The statements of Kim Jensen that you heard 100% hearsay other than those text messages. And those text messages are old, and I'll talk about those.
That's good.
Testimony about Liam Bridegan. You saw the video. You'll have it, an hour and 23. I didn't play it, but he repeats himself at an hour and 34 minutes again. Yes, I saw Mario Fernandez in the house. He was playing video games. An hour 23, an hour 34. And Your Honor knows that that is a child protection team interview, that those are trained interviewers. Their purpose there is to ensure that the child is not being coached and that the child is not being manipulated. You heard the state say, well, the child was coached. She coached her kids. There's no evidence of coaching. You heard a lot of evidence of suspicion and a lot about motive. You can read 1,000 cases, Your Honor, that all say that motive is not an element to the crime of first-degree murder. Let's talk about the text messages. These texts are in 2015 and 2016 predominantly, maybe some in 2017. The detective's like, oh yeah, this continued up to 2021 and 2022. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Don't you think that the state, who has the burden here that's higher than beyond a reasonable doubt, would have hit print? They don't exist, Your Honor. They don't exist. What they show is they show dislike towards Mr. Bridegan. You have a friend venting to another friend over a very difficult co-parenting situation and a contentious divorce. And many adults in similar circumstances say the exact same thing. They're indicators of frustration but not proof of a murder on February 16th of 2022. In retrospect, those words were clearly poor judgment, but poor judgment does not in any way equate to actual intent and does not prove misconduct in this case, which would be a first-degree murder. There is zero, and I'll talk about this, there is zero evidence that was brought before you today of any act by Ms. Gardner that was done with the intent to carry out a plan or directly carry out the murder of Jared Bridegan.
True.
Detective Johns testified on direct, oh, it was contentious divorce. They were in and out of court. They talked about child custody. He hadn't even read the court filings.
How would he know?
Hadn't even read the court filings. He told you that after on cross-examination when Mr. Bias brought it up. And what did Mr. Bias tease out? Mr. Bias brought up that it was about money. It was about money for Jared Bridegan.
Oh,
And what did Jared Bridegan get from Ms. Gardner? Because money is important in this case, according to the state. Jared Bridegan stopped paying child support so the kids could go to because Ms. Gardner wanted the kids to go to Discover School. He fought tooth and nail. And then Ms. Gardner said, I'll waive the child support. Why? Because in reality, she didn't need it. And this is not a murder so that she can be trustee of her own trust. You heard that Mr. Fernandez was the one writing the checks to the Discovery School. He was transferring the money. He was doing everything with the finances. It didn't matter to Ms. Gardner. She had all the money in the world. All she had to do was ask Mr. Fernandez, the trustee. And Your Honor heard the reason for that. So that income, that money would not be directly attributable to Shanna Gardner, so that then Jared Bridegan couldn't go after her for child support and say, well, she has all this money. But that's not a motive because there's no evidence that Shanna Gardner financially benefited whatsoever from the death of Jared Bridegan. There's this fallacy that Shanna Gardner, was free to do whatever she wanted. I think that's what Ms. Stifler said, that she could move to Washington. That is a false narrative, Judge. You heard from Megan White that Shanna was run out of town and cried when she left Florida. You heard from Marla Rogers specifically about how it came about to where Shanna Gardner moved to Washington State. You heard that she lost her business as a result of the social media smear campaign. You heard that her children felt threatened, that she felt threatened.
mm-hmm.
And that is all corroborated. Why? Because, Your Honor, you have it as a defense exhibit that the Gardner family spent millions of dollars on a home in Jacksonville Beach, and that home was bought, I think, 2 weeks after. I think they closed 2 weeks after Jared Bridegan was killed. Why? So the Gardners had a place as a family to stay when they could come visit Florida. And that type of investment shows that Miss Gardner never intended to leave Florida. And it shows that Jared Bridegan was never killed so that Miss Gardner could have this miraculous freedom. There's the fallacy of the baptism, right? That Shanna killed Jared Bridegan over religion. Well, first of all, you heard that in the consent final judgment that she agreed that the kids were going to be raised in the church. You heard that Shanna may have been upset at first that the child wanted to be baptized in the church, but she did not obstruct it. In fact, she facilitated it. You heard that from Bishop Curry. And you heard that it was a coordinated effort. And the reality is, and you heard this from many witnesses, that Miss Gardner was not anti-church. She's still associated with them. Her family was still members of the church. She was not anti her daughter being baptized. That is not a motive. That is not a reason in this case. It's a false narrative. There's this idea that Miss Gardner was going to pay for Mr. Tennant, right? And how could she have not been aware of this $5,000? Mr. Fernandez was the trustee. He handled all finances. The trust is clear that Miss Gardner played no role in the finances. The bank records that you were given are clear, and the detective said it, that Mr. Fernandez wrote all the checks on that account that was used to write the checks to Henry Tennant. Miss Gardner played no role in that account or that business, though her name is on the LLC. Those homes were Mr. Fernandez's homes before they got married. Those checks that they admitted, those are all written by Mr. Fernandez. There is no financial.
Oh, I'm going to pause for a second and bring this up. Looks like like it's getting worse. There we go.
extreme winds associated with the eye wall of Hurricane Helene were moving onshore at Carabel. This is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation, all in caps. So if you are in this warning, again, you need to make sure that you are in your safe place, as hurricane force winds are now moving inland here as we speak.
Oof.
All right, we got to
Getting
do
worse.
some little maintenance here real quick. It's going to take a second, but once we get everything set up here, it'll look good.
And
Think.
make sure you sub up to this guy. It's max velocity. Pretty insane.
Give me 1 second, guys. I'm trying to fix our cameras. All right, for some reason, that's not working. All right, that's not good. All right, different thing here.
Too many
We're gonna have to do a
browser
little
tabs
bit of
open.
oh, there we go. All right, we got back. All right. Gotta do a little bit of like quick setting up here, because you guys are we're gonna have a lot of views of Hurricane Helene. I just gotta set some stuff up. This should have been set up earlier, but I just didn't have time for it.
I don't.
We're gonna have several different cameras all along the beach on the Radar Mega app with the mesovorts. So we're just putting them all into view so you can see everything. I do appreciate the patience.
Holy cow!
Let me zoom out here.
Look at these storm bands rolling in.
Actually, let me just do this. Let's do this. Let's go to this screen.
That's pretty
and
insane.
I can do it this way. Let's just do that. All right. Friendly reminder, if you are just tuning in, make sure to subscribe down below. Again, it is completely free to do. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. Like the stream.
Oh, yeah. Damn,
and if you are just tuning in, this is, again, Hurricane Helene coverage. We're going to be live here throughout landfall. If you are new to the channel, definitely recommend that you subscribe down below.
Oof. It's ripping up through there. That's pretty nasty right there. Oof. Someone's just born. That's awesome. All right. I just had to bring that up. Sorry, guys. I've sort of been watching that in the background. Here we go. We'll go back to this. Sorry about that. I just had to see where we were at with that.
Evidence linking Miss Gardner to anything that has to do with this case. Mr. Fernandez even wrote the checks, the detective brief for the kids' school. I mean, the one thing that you think Miss Gardner, if she was going to write checks for, would be the kids' school. She didn't even do that. There is no physical evidence, no video evidence, nothing linking Miss Gardner to the killing. In fact, I think everyone agrees that she's at Walmart up until minutes before the kids get home that night on February 16th before date night. And the detective stubbornly agreed, but anything could have happened on that way home from Walmart. A crash could have occurred, traffic, and Miss Gardner wouldn't have been there for the kids to be dropped off. Why would Miss Gardner cut it so close, Your Honor? Well, because she believed Mr. Fernandez would be there, which is what Liam Bridegan says in the CPT. Henry Tennant, and this was clear, Your Honor, does not mention Shanna Gardner in the planning or execution of the killing. He does not ever even say he's ever met her, because Mr. Bias cross-examined the detective on that, and the detective corrected him and said, no, Tennant didn't say that. Miss Gardner says that in a phone call that she met him once 5 years earlier. And what is the state's theory of the killing? The state's theory of the killing is that Miss Gardner said, hey, I'm going to divorce you unless you go kill Jared Bridegan, and then I'm going to stay with you, and that's going to save our marriage. That's the state's theory. That's what Henry Tennant says. They had already told the school that they were divorcing. And guess what? They all but divorced. And because they did what they said they were going to do, the state somehow tells you that's evidence of first-degree murder.
Can I ask you about that?
Yes.
So I want your view on that same statement that I just asked Ms. Stifler about.
The Hawaii statement?
Correct.
Well, what Ms. Stifler left out, I think the detective said it, was Shanna Gardner's response, according to Ms. Jensen, was absolutely not.
Okay. And that came not through a text message. That came out through text message, but grand jury testimony, is that your understanding?
That's my understanding. But I believe the detective said this because I think Ms. Tippler brought it out on direct, that Ms. Jensen's testimony was that Ms. Gardner said, absolutely not. I don't want that.
And this was delivered when she got back from Hawaii. This was from Ms. Gardner supposedly
to Ms.
to
Jensen
KJ after the
Supposedly.
Hawaii trip.
after the Hawaii trip or during, or maybe it was a phone call from Hawaii.
Okay.
And so even if you believe Ms. Jensen, and Judge, I want to harp on this, right? The state didn't bring Ms. Jensen in here. Okay, and that's an issue for them because we believe that there are credibility issues with that statement. But it's hard to get it when you're talking about double hearsay because Detective Johns wasn't even at the grand jury. And so that goes against the state that they didn't bring Ms. Jensen in here. If they're saying she's essentially the link to all of this, and you have hearsay. And at best,
Well, hearsay is admissible,
I don't
but it can't all be based on hearsay.
I don't disagree with you, Judge, but the problem that this court should have with that is that the connections here, and they're trying to connect several dots, that the weight the court should give to the testimony of Detective Johns should not be given significant weight, especially with respect to Ms. Jensen. Because here's the problem with Ms. Jensen, is she wasn't brought in here. And then what are probably the most incriminating testimony from Ms. Jensen is not in the grand jury. It's when they pull her over and basically arrest her and transport her to the state attorney's office and then try and freeze her out by leaving her isolated in a room, making her think she herself is a murderer. And then she apparently makes these statements that incriminate my client, Ms. Gardner, but despite technology in 2023, no one decides to take a recorded statement for her. They don't say right after that, Your Honor, we're going to take a sworn. They don't write a report on it. And the first time that anyone on this side of the room hears about these statements is during this hearing, because he told you there's no report. It's not even in my case file. He said that.
I didn't pick that up.
He said there's no report. It's not in the file.
True. You did.
The state talked to you about this trip by Mario up north. Again, the problem with that is that how in the world would Miss Gardner know exactly what the children told the CPT interviewer? The reality is she didn't. There's this idea that she can hide behind LLCs and other things. Judge, look at the beach house property that I gave you. That was bought with an LLC. That's what her parents do. They buy homes in LLCs. That is not some effort to disguise Shanna Gardner. That's how they operate. And that's how they bought that beach house in Jacksonville, Florida in March 2022, when Detective Johns told you that Shanna Gardner wasn't even considered a suspect at the time. So this idea that she can hide behind LLCs and that's a concerted effort, again, that's another fallacy. This idea that Miss Gardner came up with these other theories about the killing, the timeline's important because that's early on in the case. She doesn't know anything. And does that change after Henry Tennant is arrested, after Henry Tennant's roommate, Mr. Ordway, is told that the blue truck is involved in the murder, after Ordway tells Fernandez, after Fernandez may have had a conversation with Gardner? Yeah, her knowledge admittedly changes. Okay, we don't dispute that. At best, she relied on the professional advice of others.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at worst.
And hear this through.
Your Honor, she's charged as a principal. The state agreed that she wasn't the actual person that killed Mr. Bridegan, but you have no evidence of any planning, plotting, participation whatsoever in what happened on Sanctuary Boulevard on February 16th of 2022. Zero evidence. There's no evidence that she acted as a principal, which is one who intentionally, right? It's not like, hey, I hate my ex, right? That doesn't get you there. Saying I wish he was dead doesn't get you there. Saying 6 years earlier that does anyone know a hitman? That doesn't get you there. It's someone who intentionally aids, abets, counsels, hires, or procures that offense to be committed. And you don't have any evidence that she ever intentionally did any of those things.
That is true. They haven't provided it yet.
Now, Miss
I'm not
Stifler
saying they won't.
spent a lot of time,
Right.
well, this is a first degree murder case. She's charged with capital first degree murder. The state's seeking the death penalty. That was their decision, right? As this court knows, that is a discretionary decision to both indict her and seek the death penalty. And she is indicted as a principal. This very well could have been left in a conspiracy. That was a discretionary decision. And they act like, well, they don't tell you like, hey, we did this. And now we want, because we did this, you should do something. That's the truth. They didn't have to do that, Judge. And that is no reason for this court to consider in whether or not they have proven proof evident presumption great with regard to first degree murder, because they haven't. Moving to the pretrial detention aspect, Your Honor, Miss Gardner has no criminal history. Her entire family resides in the United States. She has never fled. She never fled Florida to Washington. In fact, she and her family made significant effort and expended significant resources and energy to make herself available to this court prior to her arrest. You heard from Mr. Cox about the surrender, that he told the state she's willing to surrender. He told you that he had her come back here, so she was in striking distance. You have the email he sent. The state didn't take him up on that offer. That's their choice, okay? But at the end of the day, that's evidence of that she is not a flight risk. The law enforcement were out in Washington State in February 2023, executing a search warrant for the phones. They knew exactly where she was. And she has two young children that desperately need their mother, and one with a very serious medical condition that all but prevents her from fleeing, because he can only live in places that are below 1,000 feet sea level, above sea level. With regard to dangerousness to the community, no evidence whatsoever. You heard from Ms. Rogers about Ms. Gardner's conduct in the community while they lived in Washington, that she was well liked, that she never observed any type of criminal behavior. Again, there's no allegation that she ever participated in the killing. She's charged as a principal. And this idea going back about burner phones and we're going to evade the wires, it's ironic, Judge, because they're talking about this on phones that they're saying are recorded, and they continue to talk about it. They're not evading anything, and the state didn't show you a single instance where they evaded any type of wire or law enforcement effort.
Very true.
The state goes after the word kill. Judge, again, those are old text messages. And she's upset and they're in the moment, just like she is in those other instances where she uses the word kill. So the state has not met their evidentiary burden of proof evident presumption great. They have not carried its burden to prove, and this is clear from 3.132, their burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Gardner would be a danger to the community if released. They've not proven that. And there are certainly conditions of release that can assure her presence at trial. I know that the state also mentioned the integrity of the judicial process and the family, but what did Ms. White tell you? She told you like, hey, we were told not to discuss the case. We're not going to discuss the case. We haven't discussed the case. And she was pressed by Ms. Stifler like 10 different times. So the idea that because Shanna could have contact with her family, that would threaten the integrity of the judicial process, Judge, there's no evidence that supports that. None. In fact, you have evidence to the contrary.
Yep, true.
So going back to where we started, which is the Florida Constitution, that uses the term reasonable conditions. And that includes both monetary and non-monetary conditions. And we ask that the court not take into consideration the resources of the Gardner parents in setting that bond, because the reality is that Ms. Gardner herself is not a wealthy person. Any bond would likely be put up by the family, but the monetary amount should not be the focus. The focus should be non-monetary conditions, because this family has already demonstrated that they are going to spend money, time, and effort to make sure that their daughter is here before the court. We suggest that there are also non-monetary conditions, such as a GPS device or other things that the court could consider, restrictions on travel, things of that nature, that could assure that Ms. Gardner understands that she must remain able and willing. I can tell you Ms. Gardner is willing to comply with whatever this court orders. And so, Your Honor, if Ms. Gardner is detained. It's got to be under the authority of the law. It has to be based on the evidence that happened in this courtroom today, and not on speculation, not on assumptions, not on unreliable hearsay. And Your Honor, we ask that you grant Ms. Gardner a bond with reasonable conditions.
Right, thank you.
There you
I'm
go.
going to take this matter under advisement.
If she's got any
One
questions,
more statement, it's a legal argument, it's not a factual one. Based on something the court asked the defense attorneys.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify the concept of whether hearsay alone is sufficient. And under State v. Arthur it is. I'm quoting State v. Arthur. And it says, because Arthur actually was about whether or not the indictment was enough in and of itself. Because here we have, this case has already been presented to a grand jury and they have indicted. State v. Arthur says that the indictment is insufficient in and of itself. But the state's burden to foreclose bail as a matter of right is present when some further evidence, which viewed in the light most favorable to the state, would be legally sufficient to sustain a jury verdict of guilty. The state can probably carry this burden by presenting the evidence relied upon by the grand jury or the state attorney in charge of the crime. This evidence may be presented in the form of transcripts or affidavits, which can be totally hearsay. If after considering all the evidence, the court finds that the proof is evident and the presumption great, then as the defense attorney correctly stated, the court has the discretion to deny bail. So I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. I think I'm tired. So I think,
yeah,
no, so it's not enough for pretrial detention. It is for Arthur. My brain is barely functioning. Y'all have worn me out today. Okay, so I'm going to take this matter under advisement. I thank everyone for your time and patience tonight. I appreciate everyone pushing
wore me out. Now, this is back in August
we have a court date on
2023. We have more recent ones.
So I will roll by order, and then we'll just come together on the 24th. We can just keep that date, okay? All right, so the next court date will be May 24th, 9 a.m. And that's for the case management hearing, but I'm going to rule by order, okay? I'm sorry. Yes.
And there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's that one. This one's already been resolved. We have a newer one that's been set up for that, which is going to get. I'm going to show that one. That one would have been in August of this year, but I'm not doing that tonight because that was a lot to go through, and just trying to get caught up on it. I mean, it doesn't matter which side you're taking on this one, whether you want to free her or get justice for Jared. You have a justice for Jared in there. That's just to let people know that, hey, this is where you can find some of this coverage because you're not going to find it elsewhere. There will be people that start covering this as it gets closer, and it is getting very close. This is probably going to be happening about the same time as Sarah Boone. So I'll be making an executive decision. Depends on what happens with Sarah Boone or whether I move over to this one and start covering it, or if I just switch it between the 2 days. So there's a lot going on here with both of these. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call it a night. It has been just a little bit under 2 hours. Don't know much about this case other than he was shot with his 2-year-old in the vehicle, and his ex-wife ex-wife, her husband, and another gentleman named Mr. Tennant are all accused of murder. Mr. Tennant has been the one that said that he did the pew-pewing on behest of Mr. Fernandez, sorry. And they're trying to tie her into this also. Could be that she was involved, but we'll let the court, we'll let the jury decide whether she's guilty or not. If she is guilty, then she could be up for the death penalty. That gives you any idea how serious this is. Sarah Boone, she's not up for death penalty. This lady will be up for death penalty if she is found guilty of this. As will Mr. Fernandez and possibly Mr. Tennant, although I think they brought his amount down quite a bit in the amount of time that he's going to have to spend in jail. which won't be life. Well, I mean, I think he's got life, but not like they're not going to delete him. So with that, I'm going to send you guys over to go see Tom Gillis. Give him a little bit of love. Give him a thumbs up. Slap him. Subscribe if you're not. And with that, I will see you guys very soon. I'll probably jump over on Tom's for a little bit. I'll see you guys soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. Peace out.
Running through the maze, I felt the pain, chasing what only a dream, breaks in the scheme. Waking up at dawn, all my fears are gone, all stop today, never, never, not today. Compromise, rise above it all, not gonna fall. Step by step I go, faster than